one phone call. That's all it took to ignite a firestorm that would consume a police officer's career, dismantle a department's reputation, and prove that true power rarely needs to raise its voice. Tonight, we delve into the story of a routine arrest that became a national headline. The night police officers put the daughter of one of Hollywood's most formidable action legends in handcuffs, believing she was just another face in the crowd. They had no idea of the silent, unstoppable force that was about to walk through their door. Stick with us, because the fallout from this one afternoon was more explosive than any blockbuster film. It was a postcard-perfect Saturday in Santa Monica, California. The kind of afternoon where the sun hangs heavy and warm over the pier. An environmental protest was underway, a peaceful, organized gathering of students and locals. The air was filled not with anger, but with the earnest murmur of a community, their signs reading "Our oceans, our future." Woven into this crowd was Seagal. Daughter of Hollywood's most notorious tough guy, she stood with a quiet grace. She wasn't chanting, she wasn't shouting, she was simply there, a silent participant holding a sign. And that was his first and last mistake. As the protest began to wind down, just as planned, something inside Miller snapped. He decided he needed to make an example of someone. He strode forward, his finger pointing directly at Arissa. "You! Let's go! You're inciting!" She turned, her expression one of pure, unadulterated confusion. "Inciting what? We're leaving. Everyone is leaving." Her calmness, her refusal to be intimidated, seemed to pour gasoline on his internal fire. He closed the distance and grabbed her arm, his grip far too tight, a clear violation of protocol. "I gave you an order," he hissed. A wave of shock rippled through the remaining crowd. Phones, already in hand, were now raised and recording. Arissa didn't pull away. She didn't fight. In a steady, controlled voice, she simply stated a fact. "You're hurting me. This is completely unnecessary." For Corporal Miller, this was the final provocation. He twisted her arm behind her back with a brutal efficiency, forcing her down to her knees on the hard pavement. The sharp, plastic snap of zip-tie cuffs echoed in the sudden, horrified silence. In that moment, he was no longer arresting a protester. He was manufacturing an incident, and the whole world was about to watch. As Miller hauled her back to her feet, a voice from the crowd shouted the one thing Arissa refused to say herself. "Hey, do you even know who her father is?" Miller let out a dismissive scoff, not even bothering to look. "I don't care if her father is the President of the United States. She's going to jail." He paraded her toward the patrol car, a smug, triumphant look plastered on his face. In his mind, he was the image of authority. But Arissa's silence was heavier than any threat. She looked past him, at the faces in the crowd, her expression not one of anger, but of profound disbelief. The patrol car door slammed shut, sealing her in. But outside, dozens of videos were already being uploaded, carrying the image of a young woman arrested for nothing, driven away by an officer drunk on a tiny sliver of power. The drive to the station was a masterclass in tension. The air in the patrol car was so thick, you could barely breathe. Miller, itching for a reaction, decided to poke the bear. "Not so tough now, are you? Bet you'll think twice before causing trouble again." Arissa didn't respond. She just stared out the window, watching the iconic California palm trees blur into a meaningless streak of green. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, but her face was a mask of absolute composure. She was, in every sense, her father's daughter. Trained since childhood in martial arts, taught to control her breath, to find her center in the heart of chaos. She could have fought back. She could have easily broken his grip. She could have dropped his name like a bomb. She chose to do none of it. She chose to let the system, in all its ugliness, show its true colors. Miller mistook her silence for fear. He had absolutely no idea it was the dead, quiet calm before a storm he couldn't possibly imagine. At the Santa Monica police station, there was no emotional breakdown. There was no tantrum, no tears of a privileged child. Arissa moved through the booking process with a chilling, quiet dignity that began to set the veteran officers on edge. They took her photograph. They fingerprinted her. This was not the behavior they were used to. Then came the moment for her one phone call. She didn't dial her father. She dialed his lawyer, the man who had built and protected the Seagal empire for over 30 years. She spoke in a low, even tone, devoid of panic. "I'm at the Santa Monica precinct on Algonquin. I've been falsely arrested for inciting a riot during a peaceful dispersal. Please let my father know." The call lasted less than 30 seconds. She hung up. The booking sergeant, a man with 25 years on the job, felt a cold prickle of unease. He'd seen Hollywood meltdowns. He'd seen entitled rage. This was something else entirely. This was controlled, precise, and infinitely more threatening. Less than an hour later, the front doors of the station swung open with a purpose that made everyone look up. Steven Seagal walked in. He was not the action star from the silver screen. He was dressed in simple, severe black. He said nothing. He didn't have to. His presence was a physical force, a wall of cold, controlled fury that seemed to suck the very air out of the room. The desk sergeant froze, his words catching in his throat. Flanked by two lawyers in immaculate suits, Seagal stopped in the middle of the lobby. He just stood there, his eyes silently scanning every corner, every face, taking in the world that had dared to cage his daughter. At that moment, Corporal Miller walked out of a side office, sharing a laugh with a colleague. The laughter died in his throat as he saw who was standing there. The blood drained from his face, his smug confidence instantly evaporating into pure, unadulterated fear. The station chief came rushing out, his face a mess of confusion and panic. Before he could stammer out a greeting, one of the lawyers stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "We are here for Arissa Seagal. The charge, we believe, is inciting a riot. We have 52 separate video files showing she was leaving peacefully when your officer assaulted her. We'll be needing his name and badge number." The air crackled with unspoken threats. Steven Seagal hadn't moved a muscle. He just stared. He stared right at Corporal Miller, and in that silent, unblinking gaze, Miller knew with absolute certainty that his career was over. This story is just getting started. If you believe that unchecked power must be held accountable, take a moment to hit that thumbs up button. And if you think that officer just had the single worst moment of his entire life, let me know in the comments below. The fallout was not a negotiation, it was a demolition. Seagal's legal team released the body cam footage. The video didn't show a belligerent celebrity's daughter. It showed a calm, composed young woman being manhandled and humiliated by an officer on a disturbing power trip. The public reaction was a tidal wave. Free Arissa and justice for Arissa trended for days. The humiliation was swift and brutal, but not for Arissa. It was for the department and for Corporal Miller, whose name and face were plastered across every news outlet, a symbol of police overreach. Miller was immediately placed on administrative leave. Steven Seagal never made a public statement. He didn't need to. His legal team did the talking, filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the city of Santa Monica and against Miller personally, citing wrongful arrest, assault, battery, and gross negligence. The city's lawyers, seeing the mountain of evidence, advised an immediate settlement. Within 24 hours, all charges against Arissa were dropped, and her record was expunged. Corporal Miller was fired. The station chief issued a humiliating televised apology, and the entire department was mandated to undergo new, comprehensive de-escalation training. The incident became a lesson in the nature of modern power. It proved that true strength doesn't need to scream its own name from the rooftops. It often arrives in silence, and with its sheer presence, it changes everything. A uniform and a badge are not a license for abuse, and in the age of the smartphone, every action is on the record. Corporal Miller went looking for a confrontation to feel powerful. He picked a target he thought was weak, and in doing so, he orchestrated the end of his own career. Arissa Seagal's composure was her ultimate weapon. She understood something Miller did not. She let his own aggression become the evidence. She let him build his own cage. She knew that the consequences delivered by the system he represented would be far more severe than anything she could do in that moment. The quietest person on that pier was, in fact, the most dangerous. So, what happened after the headlines faded? The city offered a substantial settlement. Arissa accepted the full amount and immediately donated every penny to a non-profit organization that provides legal aid to protesters who don't have a famous father to call. And Corporal Miller? After being fired, he was unemployable in any law enforcement capacity. The personal lawsuit left him financially ruined. Steven Seagal never spoke a single word to him. He never had to. The cold, efficient machinery of the law was his only response. When asked to comment, Arissa gave one brief interview. She said, "What happened to me happens to people every day who don't have the resources I have. They are the ones this story is really about. If you believe this was justice served, hit that subscribe button for more stories where the truth finally comes to light." Comment "Silent Power" down below if you think the Seagal family handled this perfectly. Corporal Miller thought he was making an example of a nobody. He learned far too late that he had picked the wrong person from the wrong family. But the real twist isn't just that Arissa Seagal was the daughter of an action star. The twist is how that immense power was wielded. Not with fists, not with movie-style threats, but with absolute silence, surgical precision, and the cold, unyielding weight of the law. Miller wanted to make an example out of her, and in the end, he became the example. A chilling, modern reminder that in this world, you never, ever truly know who you're dealing with. Thanks for watching.